Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today, I'm going to talk about Through the Ages. This is an epic, abstract, engine-building civilization game. First, I'll do a rules overview, and then I'll jump into my review.
Alright, so how do we play Through the Ages? Well, to begin with, we have one central player board, which tracks the status of our civilizations, and has a bunch of cards on the card row. And then every player is also going to have a personal player board here, with a bunch of cubes on them. Actually, most people playing this game are going to have a bunch of discs. I happen to have cubes because I bought a little upgrade pack from the Board Game Geek store, but that's why these are cubes. But the colors are all the same. And so we have blue cubes and we have yellow cubes, and then white and red over here. And this is essentially your civilization right here. It's very abstracted. There is no map anywhere. This just shows how good your civilization is at doing things. And the cubes are multi-purpose. They mean different things based on where they are. So to start, we have these yellow cubes here, and down here they are essentially potential population that you could create. Once they're here, they are unused workers, and then once they're actually up here on top of cards, then they are workers that are currently in use. They're more like buildings, but I'm just going to say they're workers up here. So what that means is that this is one philosophy lab, these are two agricultural farms, and this is one infantry warrior. And the cube gets you a benefit equal to the level of the card. So this one warrior cube is giving us one military strength, which is why myself and potentially the green player are both at one military strength at the beginning of the game. And this one philosophy lab is getting us one light bulb, which is science on this science track. So let's talk about these tracks. These three tracks right here show the current level of your science, culture, and military in the game. And what that means is you're going to make this much science and culture at the end of each turn, and the military just shows you where you're at. So right now, you make 2 science a turn. And you track the science on this track up here. It goes all the way up here. And so this shows you how much stockpiled science you have. And then you track culture on the culture track that goes around the board, and these is also known as victory points. So getting these every turn is good. So going back over here, if we look to our farms, then this just means each of these cubes is going to produce one cube. That's just part of production. Whenever you do production, every yellow cube will create one blue cube, but you'll put that cube on the level that it's at, and those cubes equal the value. So both of these blue cubes equal 1 food because they're on this. Same goes with mines for making ore, and those are the only 2 resources in the game, food and ore. So let's talk about how you play your turn. The first thing you do is you can take a political action. You have this kind of side hand of cards that are called military cards. They have a dark background, they're hidden, they're drawn randomly, the only real part of randomness in the game. And you could do a political action which involves seeding an event or attacking somebody. I'm not really going to go into too much detail on these. In this overview, I'm going to try and go at high level and not go into the nitty-gritty, so this doesn't take half an hour. When you seed events, you place them down here, you get a victory point equal to the age you played, and then you get to reveal an event, and it happens to everyone. This one gives everybody 2 science, so they go up on here. Yay, cool. So you get your political action, and then you jump into the main part of the game, which is on your turn, you look at your civil actions, which are these white ones here, and your military actions, which are these red ones here. These start out being equal to your government level. So we have 4 white and 2 red, because we all start out with despotism. And then you just do your turn. You progress all these at the same time, and then once you've done all of your actions, your turn is over, you'll produce, and then it's the next person's turn. There's a big blocky turns. And most of the things you want to do will cost an action. So let's talk about the main thing that you do, which is drafting cards from this card row here. And this is actually the thing that breaks what I just said. This is what can cost multiple actions. So you see this disc down at the bottom is the number of actions it takes to draft those cards. So these all cost 1, these right here cost 2 civil actions, and these right here, these cost 3 civil actions to draft, to bring them into your hand. And your hand limit is dictated by the number of civil actions you have. So you have a hand limit of 4 at the beginning of the game. So, I could just draft a card. This would cost me 1 civil action to bring in my hand. And usually I just track it by putting it off to the side. And now it's in my hand. The next thing that you really potentially want to do is play cards from your hand. So every card that has a blue number on it with a light bulb is called a technology. So you can see that Governments are a technology. These are special technologies. And this theater is a technology. Any card that has this is that. And it costs a civil action, boink, down there, to play these. And you put them out in the column of the associated top right text. So this is a mine, this is a mine. That's now an upgrade. But that costs 5 science to do. So let's just pretend I had been at 5 science. I would go down to that. So that's going to take a few turns to generate that much science in order to build iron. So that's one thing you can do for a civil action. Another thing you could do for a civil action is to place these yellow guys down into a new building. So when I do that, it costs whatever the building says it costs. So I could build a new bronze mine for 2 ore or a new iron mine for 5 ore. I could build a philosophy lab over here for 3 ore. Let's pretend I do that. Now we'd go over here. Actually, I can't. Let's pretend I had 1 more ore. There we go. Now I have 3 ore. These are each value 1. I place this here. Cost 3 ore. And these all go back to the ore bank over here. So that's one way you can build, you can get these unused workers out. They just cost ore, and the moment you do that, you get the benefit. So this increases our science by 1. Now we're going to make 2 science a turn, which is very good. Next thing I want to talk about is upgrading. We put this upgrade technology down, but if we want these yellow bronze mines to become iron mines, which are way more efficient, we're going to have to spend a civil action and then the difference in ore to upgrade. So in this case, 5 minus 2 is 3. So again, it would have cost 3 ore. They would have had to be over here already. You can spend 3 ore back to the ore bank, and now you could move one of these guys up. And now at the end of your turn, since every yellow cube nets you a blue cube, the blue cube that this guy nets is going to be worth 2 ore. So you're getting much more efficient. So those are some of the main things that you can do with the civil actions. You use military actions to increase your... actually, jumping over real quick. One also very significant civil action is to create new people. So we take them from our population bank down here, we bring them up here for that 1 civil action, and we pay food equal to little food bag costs. So that would cost us 2 food. Those would come down here. And now I have another person that I can use to deploy. And now jumping into military. Military actions are... more focused on the military cards themselves. So if you want to build another warrior, then you would put that over here, you would spend the 2 ore, and that would cost you a military action in order to do, but now you would go up 1 military strength because each one of these cubes is 1 military value. And there are other techs out there, like this is knights, it's cavalry instead of infantry, so you put this to the side, and if you make that instead, then that 1 cube would be worth 2 military. Cool. So that's kind of like a brief overview of many of the options that you can do with your civil actions on your turn, and you can just mix and match and oftentimes do really cool things to chain up and just build up your engine. At the end of your turn, you're going to discard cards equal to the number of players, or based off this rubric. If it was a 2-player game, then all 3 of these cards would go away, and then these cards would all slide down, and then we would get new cards from this stack right here. Very briefly, I just want to mention that there are a couple different types of cards we have in here. We have leaders. You can only have 1 of them at a time, and they do various special bonuses. We have wonders, which you take and immediately put into play but unbuilt, and then it costs ore in different stages to build this. So 3 different stages. The first one 2 ore, then 4 ore, then 2 ore, and then the wonder gets you benefits. And then also governments. They're a technology. You can spend the small number to go into a revolution and essentially skip the rest of your turn, or you can spend the larger number of technology to place the government down, and this is one of the ways that you can get more civil action cubes and more military action cubes. So getting new governments is very important. So we keep playing around. Oh, and then once you do all these things, then we do production. And just one more time, when you do production, you take 1 cube per yellow, 1 blue cube per yellow cube, and to put them up here. So I have 2 yellow cubes, that gets me 2 blue cubes. Each of these are worth 2 food, so I just made 2 food. You look down at your consumption. If, for instance, I had made this guy, then we see we now have 1 consumption, which means your population just is so big that they eat 1 every single turn. And then you go over here, you do your production of ore. I have 1 bronze and 1 iron. That means I just made 3 ore, because this one is value 2 and this one's value 1. And if you're being really inefficient with your turn, you could see if all these blue cubes were out in various different places, this says 2 corruption. You would actually pay a penalty back to your bank if you're just not being efficient enough. If you have these blues are gone, then you would actually have to pay this right back, and you would have only netted one ore on that turn. So you really want to make sure to keep using your blue cubes. You don't want them just to get stuck in different places. Making resources is really important, but being efficient and not making too much is also very important in this game. And we keep doing our turns round and round and round, and you keep drawing from this stack. Once you've drawn this entire Age 1 stack, and they've all come out on the row, every single card's going to come out, then you go to the box and you get out Age 2, you put this here, and then the Age 2 cards come out, and they are more powerful. We have, a theater here now, which is just the upgraded version of drama here, and you see the technology gets more, the ore gets very, very expensive, but the benefits get better. And in this game, you go through the 3 different ages. Oops, that shouldn't be there. But lastly, you have Age 3, and then once you go through all of Age 3, then you have played the complete game, and you see who has the most victory points at the end. I do want to spend just a minute to go over aggressions a little bit more, so you have some idea, because I'm going to be discussing this quite a bit in the review part of the game, and just to show you how these work. So this is part of that political action I talked about in the very first round before you do the bulk of your turn, and these essentially let you attack other players. They cost military actions to do, so you see this one has a little red disc there, so that would cost a red action to do it. And then you just say to an opponent, so I could say to my green opponent, if we look over here right now, my green opponent is at military value 1, I am at military value 3. I could just say, green, I am attacking you with a value of 3. At this point, green now has the opportunity to try to defend themselves. And there are a couple different ways they can do that. The first thing is some of these cards that come from this military stack can be defense cards. So military could just say, I defend at 3, reveal defense cards, so that's 2 plus 1 equals 3, and ties go to the defender, and then the aggression would be nullified. But if green did not have one of these, then the only other options green could have would be to sacrifice units that they might already have in order to make the score bigger. So if green, if we pretend green only has 1 military value, so green would just have the 1 warrior. I know this is the red board, but forgive me. Then he's getting that 1 military value, but you can also sacrifice one of your units to get its value again. So he could sacrifice his 1 warrior to get 1 more military value, so 1 plus 1 is 2, but that wouldn't be strong enough in this instance to defend 3 level aggression. So in that case, orange, myself, would win. And then you, in this case, destroy a rival's urban building, and you get ore equal to half the building's cost. So urban buildings are these gray ones right here, so you can really get in there and break apart opponents' pieces of their engine through these various aggressions. There's lots of different types of aggressions. There are also war cards, which are much bigger aggressions that take an entire round to go through, and they can actually backfire on the person who starts the war. But the war can do as much as destroy many different buildings or kill many different yellow cubes from an opponent's player board. So these aggressions and wars have a very real impact on how the game is played, because they can destroy engine. They don't necessarily just target victory points. In fact, for the most part, very few of them do target victory points. Most of them destroy buildings or destroy units, so they can be very destructive. Alright, so with that, I'm going to jump over and start discussing my review of this game. For my review of Through the Ages, like normal, I'm going to start off with the things I really enjoy about the game, then I'm going to cover some potential issues I have, and lastly go through some things I dislike about the game. Now, I've played this game 17 times. About half of those have been online, and half of them have been in person, in the cardboard. And one of the things that I love about this game that just comes out every single time I play is how incredibly satisfying each individual turn can be in this game. Some of the most satisfying turns I've ever taken in any board game ever have been in Through the Ages. So that's a pretty big thumbs up when it comes to that. I really, really enjoy the options that you have on your turns. Now, sometimes you have a stinker of a turn, or a turn that's kind of just, it's obvious. I mean, especially early game when you only have 4 actions. The turns can be a little bit quicker and a little bit less interesting. But, once you start getting 5, 6, 7 actions, or even when you have 4 actions, you can have some very interesting decisions to make. When you're drafting these cards, these cost 1 civil action, these cost 2, these cost 3. If there's a tech that comes out that you think is just close to mandatory for yourself, like iron, oftentimes people will consider spending 3 civil actions to grab. You get to think about the cost analysis, the cost benefit analysis for taking that. What's the relative benefit that it's going to get you? You're going to potentially sacrifice a whole turn if you're spending 3 out of your 4 actions to take that card. And you might even corrupt. You might, with your last action, you might not be able to spend enough of these cubes to get them down here to dodge that, but that still might be worth it to you to get that card because you think it's so necessary. I found that in a 4-player game, at least online, the games usually go about 19 turns. And so, losing 1 turn, or not losing, but, having sort of a null engine building turn to get a building block that you desperately need is not the end of the world. However, these things do add up. The way that the culture and the science work out, if you get this one little culture on the 3rd turn of the game that ends up going 19 turns long, well, that one culture point is actually going to be worth about 16 points to you. And I've many times seen the game won or lost by less than that. Oftentimes you win by more than 16 points, but that's a very real number of culture that has a very big impact on whether you win or lose the game. So it's very, very interesting options that you have. Do you spend your actions to increase your population, to spend these cubes so that you don't corrupt? And then if you do that, well, then that might say, well, you can't get this action, or you can't get that action. You really get to, well, there's so many things to think about, and it's really satisfying to think about, I find, usually. The next thing that I really like about this game is the balance between greed and military. And by that I mean greed being, if you go heavy engine and light military, then you are going to be weak. You're going to be susceptible to attacks, but you're going to be making more science and more culture, science being way more important early and mid-game. Versus if you go heavy military, well, your engine's going to be pretty weak. You're not going to be making that much resources or science or culture, but you might be scary. You might have lots of military, and people are going to be worried about what you could do to them. And oftentimes, you don't even have to attack them in order to penalize somebody for going greedy. If that person goes greedy and I go military, they might slow down or stop their greed entirely and just get some military on the board because they're really scared of being dismantled by a precise aggression or two that you might be able to get in there and really slow their stuff down. So it's really cool how if you go military, you don't necessarily have to attack people. Just the threat of your military is going to affect how other people play. Potentially. Some people don't, and oftentimes those people get steamrolled at some point in the game. It's really important to make sure you are not way behind on military because it really can destroy your engine. So I really like the balance between, usually you're going to be somewhere between heavy greed and heavy military. And it's just really cool to see how the game balances out. If that person over there, maybe they're not going crazy greedy, but they're just a little bit better engine than you. And you're looking at the cards out in front of you and you say, I can't catch up to them in the engine department in the short to medium run right now. I am going to shift a little bit more military. And that little shift towards military will make them sweat a little bit more and then shift a little bit away potentially and there's all these subtle little shifts in the game as you're building your civilizations that everyone is actively paying attention to because you have to pay attention to it. Otherwise, things can just get out of control relatively quickly. So now I'm going to shift into some potential issues that can come up in this game. The first thing is that long-term strategy is awesome in this game, and it's also potentially a big deterrent to playing with newer players or newer players playing with you. I really like that you're going to go through this whole deck and this whole deck and this whole deck. You're going to see every single one of these cards. You just don't know what order they're going to come out in. So if once you played this game several times, you know that the operas are going to come out, and you know that Shakespeare's really great with operas, or various combos that you can work towards. And if it's your first time playing, you're not going to know any of that. I've played many games where I lap in points. I double the score of the other people I'm teaching because I've played it 10, 12 times at that point. It's their first time, and they think they're doing great, and then the pieces to my engine fall into place, and suddenly I'm making 3 times as much culture as them, and I immediately go way past them. So that can definitely be a potential issue for newer players to this game, playing with people who've played many times already. There's definitely a huge skill gap if you've played or not played, which is potentially a good thing and potentially a bad thing. The next potential issue with this game is the playtime. I found, realistically, this game plays about an hour to an hour and a half per person. And that's a long game. You know, a 4-player game of this, if you just sit down and play it, will likely take you 6 hours. At least in my experience. I mean, some people, you look on Board Game Geek, I'm sure people say, no, I've played a game in 3 hours. But from my experience, that's going to be a very long game. That's going to be a major commitment for your day. Even a 2-player game can take a couple hours. Like, I think 2 hours would be the quickest I could see myself playing a 2-player game of this, even with someone who really knows what they're doing. Because even though you really know how to play the game, the more you know, the more you know. So sometimes someone who's new to the game takes a quicker turn than someone who really knows the game because they don't know all the ramifications of the actions that they're about to take. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, is that you're sitting down to a big game. And part of the reason that's potentially not an issue is if you play online, then, you know, sure, you might have downtime of an entire day between turns, but you go about your life and you have a game take a whole month, but that's fine because you're not sitting down committed to it. In fact, that's potentially really fun because you can take an entire day just reveling in that delicious turn that I was telling you about earlier and not really worrying about people around the table, you know, giving you really angry looks because you're just taking too damn long with your turn. So the last part of my the potential issues I have with this game are just how downtime and analysis paralysis definitely feed into that long play time, and that is that, you know, certain players will just take too long on their turns. You know, I like to revel in my turns, but once the turn clock is going on 7-8 minutes, you just really want that person to take their turn because, you know, even if everyone takes a 4-minute turn, if you're in a 4-person game, well, you know, it's 12 minutes between turns, and there's lots to think about and strategize and talk about with the opponents who are not actively in the turn. But analysis paralysis and downtime could definitely be potential issues with this game. Alright, and for the third part of my review, the things I dislike about the game, realistically I'm just going to cover one thing, but it's a pretty big thing in my opinion. And that is that I've found in every game I play of this now, especially with experienced players, not so much with new players, is that late game, high over-militarization is a dominant strategy. And I don't necessarily mean that that person wins, but I do mean that the person or persons who go high dominant on military are going to obliterate other people who literally can't catch up. And I played this I played this 17 times, and so I could say, well, those people were not good enough, but in the late game, military jumps of 20 to 25 points are common, I've found, at least when I'm playing with really good players. And usually when that happens, other players cannot catch up to that humongous single turn burst. And then the person who has the crazy high military, well, they wouldn't have done that if they didn't have, you know, wars or really bad aggressions in their hand already. And then they start to rain these down on the people who literally have no way of getting up to that military level. You know, there just simply aren't enough techs, or they're just not getting lucky enough to pull the correct tactics cards. I didn't describe tactics cards in the rules overview, but they're military bonuses for having certain sets of military. And if you just don't have the correct ones, and there is no military out here, you could just find this awesome engine that you've spent 4 hours building just get eviscerated by a war. You know, these wars, you know, some of them, like this one, is just culture, so it's just going to take, you know, 40 victory points from you or something like that. But other ones like Holy War and War over Territory, like these destroy your buildings. These take your yellow cubes and they go away. They just get destroyed. You lose your resources. And it's not that you lose some resources or some buildings. You get crushed into the Stone Age. And there's nothing you can do about it oftentimes. Sometimes you can, but the problem is if you're the weakest. And even if you're only weakest by a couple, you essentially always, if you're not going heavy military, you want to be the second to most weakest. Because the most weakest person is going to get attacked. And if they sacrifice a bunch of units to try and defend, then that makes them even weaker on subsequent turns. So then there's this effect of you're too weak, You have no way of getting anywhere near prepared after a humongous burst turn. You get hit hard, your engine gets destroyed, and now you're even less able to defend yourself. And you'll find you're doing great, you're doing great. You know, all of you guys are at, you know, within 5 military of each other, and it might be near the beginning or middle of the third age. And then somebody has this 20-point turn, and on the next turn, they war you or do a crazy aggression. Now, suddenly, instead of being 5 away, you're 25 away. For various reasons, you know, you lose your engine and whatnot. Now you drop down by 5 more, and now the person to your right is now 10 points above you instead of 5, and then they attack you, and then you go down, and you go down, and by the time it gets back to your next turn, you're out of the game. You know, this game you might have been playing for 4 hours at this point. Or if you're playing online, you've been playing this game for 3 weeks, and you're really invested, and you've been trying. You know that it's a possibility. I've played this game, and I see it coming, and I always want to make sure I'm not the person who gets stomped on. In fact, you want to be the person who over-militarizes, but it seems like usually only 1 or 2 people get that option of really going huge on that. Now, you might say that the person who's crazy on military should not attack the weakest person. They should attack the person they think is most likely to win. But to that I say, with these wars, they absolutely should attack the weakest person. Because the way wars work is you get benefits equal to the difference in military strength. So oftentimes, it benefits the aggressor to attack the weakest person, not their biggest threat to winning the game, not the person who they think has the better engine necessarily, but the person who is least able to defend themselves, and just reap humongous benefits from that. And that person is essentially out of the game. I mean, the rules accept this. There's actually a part of the rules that talk about surrendering and bowing out of the game entirely. So obviously this is not something the designer did not know about, but I dislike it. I love the engine building in this game. I love the epic scope and the long play times, and I hate the way it seems like every single game ends these days. And again, it didn't used to happen, but it seems like now that I play with my experienced players, almost every game ends with this crazy militarization. Maybe one person is able to match, 1 or 2 people aren't, and they lose. They get obliterated, and then they have no chance to win. And and again, like, that person who went crazy military does not necessarily always win, but they oftentimes decide who doesn't win. And that's a very real problem that I have with this game, and honestly, it's part of the reason I've slowed down playing this game almost to a standstill. I still love this game. I have a very nostalgic love for this game, and I will still play this game, I'll still own this game, but man, I really wish it didn't have that. And I also don't want to play without aggressions. Because, like I said in the parts I love about this game, I love that tension between building your engine and going military, and the subtle, like, the shifts and the way you want to do that. The problem is how incredibly volatile military is late game. It's the spiking that happens. It's the way you can go from, 10 to 10 to like 25 or whatever in just one turn, and just how, this long-term planning, just at a certain point, you're not able to deal with it. And so yeah, in conclusion, I love this game. In conclusion, I recommend this game, but really big asterisk, because wow, is military it can suck a lot of fun out of the end of the game. And when it's a long game like that, you want the end to be satisfying, even if you lose. And it is not satisfying to get bombed back into the Stone Age. Alright, well, I hope you've enjoyed my review of Through the Ages. It's been one of the more challenging ones I've had to do, and let me know if you have any comments, and I'll see you guys next time.